Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and Toward Inclusive Excellence, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Bridging the Gap Between Scholarship and Public Interest. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speaker and to submit any comments. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for throughout the session, so please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there's closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom panel of your screen. Also, please note that we are recording today's session, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version. Now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Fatima, who will talk more about Toward Inclusive Excellence.
Hi, everyone. My name's Fatima Mohielden. I'm the editor for TIE. Today's session is part of Toward Inclusive Excellence, or TIE as we call it for short, which is a content strand from Choice that explores issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in and outside of the higher education community. We regularly publish blog posts, interviews, resource lists, and more. And if you would like updates about new blog posts, resource lists, and podcast episodes, please use the links in the chat to sign up for our newsletter and to read the TIE blog, and Sabrina has just dropped those in the chat for you. And if you're interested in contributing to TIE, please feel free to reach out to me directly by email. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. Hope that went through. And so now I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Nanda Dyssou. Nanda Dyssou is the founder and lead publicist of the Los Angeles-based Coriolis Company, where she and her team specialize in crafting and executing media strategies that bring academic books to wider audiences. Known for her dedication to BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and other historically underrepresented authors, she is proud to have been called the author whisperer by publishers for her ability to keep nervous debut authors focused. Nanda has a keen awareness of how librarians, booksellers, and community leaders connect readers to ideas that matter, and prioritizes working closely with these groups, as well as publishers, universities, and literary organizations, to ensure that her clients' works become part of the public conversation. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Nanda.
Thank you, Fatima, and thank you, Choice. Thank you, Ty, for having me. I am so excited to be in the company of librarians. I admire what you do, and I definitely appreciate what you have done for our clients. And I will talk about that a little bit, and I will, my goal will be to help you do that for more academics and more public intellectuals, more speakers, more experts. So a little bit of relevant information in terms of my event-related experience. I have organized close to 700 events before I even got started working with academics. And the reason I did that is because, one, I'm a very social kind of person, and two, I moved to Los Angeles from Hungary, and I needed to find a community. And the only way I knew how to do that was by organizing events and then putting them on a website called meetup.com, which was very popular at the time. It still works, but it's not as popular. And so through that, I have organized 700 events from Orange County to Los Angeles to Ventura County, all over Southern California. So I have definitely done the work that many of you are doing. I know how hard it can be, and I have gathered lots of tips and tricks, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of the relevant ones with you. With that said, I do have a presentation I'm happy to show you, but what would be the most helpful way of doing this is, sure, I'll pull up my slides, but if you have any questions, anything pops into your head, please put it in the question box in the chat, and then I can answer them, because I think that might be a little bit more helpful than just me telling you my ideas and my experience. So I'll start by sharing why I named this How to Make Your Library a Community Space for Public Engagement and Intellectual Discussion. And I will share my presentation so that you can see some of these slides. So give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. It says screen sharing has failed, so I'm going to try again. Well, perhaps while I try to figure it out.
Yeah, we can bring it up.
Okay, perfect. So the reason I named this presentation how I named it is because I know that you as librarians already care about creating a space that is inclusive, and you care about public engagement, you care about connecting with patrons, connecting your patrons to the authors, to the intellectuals that that are in your community. But what I would like to do here is kind of open the discussion to how you can invite those who are not in your community, or those who you might think of as perhaps a little bit too academic for your patrons, or who might be a little bit too let's say out of the ordinary, because a lot of my clients are not your standard, often invited clients. We work with LGBTQ plus, disabled, BIPOC authors. Many of them are in academia, but I'm a little bit saddened to say that they are not always the first choice to be invited to events. And that's what I'm working on changing. I'm working on diversifying not just publishing, but also the event space, and working on making sure that when you put together a panel, or when you send out those invitations, you consider our clients as well as other intellectuals who are perhaps not the first choice in Google. So let's talk about who the clients are. You can see a visual representation of all of Coriolis's clients, or perhaps not all, but those who agreed to be on our website. And if you look around, you can see that this is a diverse group in terms of age, in terms of backgrounds. If we were, if it wasn't as small, you could see that most of them have two professions. They are both professors, but also possibly activists, or also lawyers, as in legal advisors, or also coaches, consultants, etc. So they have their academic life, but usually they have a life outside of that. A lot of them will come to us because they have written a book that is their first poetry collection. They don't know how to connect that to their usual academic profile, and we help them do that. And I will tell you more about how we help them do that. So the goal of this session will be to give you some practical tips, some tested strategies, some, very sort of boots on the ground kind of strategies. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. And I know that librarians are the original community builders. You don't really need me to tell you that, your patrons are ready for this and hungry for this, but again, practical tips. So I will start with I will talk about what tends to intimidate a lot of people, which is the digital tools, the tools that they may or may not have grown up with, the tools that are very, very necessary today to promoting an event. And the reason I start with this is because social media has changed so much in the last few years. For instance, the #1 social media platform I used to tell all of our authors to use in order to promote their events was always Twitter back then, before the takeover. And when a lot of academics started to leave X at that time, I told them, it's up to you, feel free to leave it. If it doesn't feel authentic, definitely leave it. But now we're still struggling to figure out, okay, where can you post to really drum up some interest for your events? And some of them are still posting on X, but most of them have transitioned to Threads, to Blue Sky, to some of the other platforms. And what I find is when we're working with a venue, or when we're working with a library specifically, they will have these accounts, but sometimes they're not as active as they could be. So I would love to be able to give you some tips on how you could amplify, or how you could help these authors that you host for the events, or even your own events, even if it's a book club or a reading event that you are hosting. What kind of content you could post that might get more engagement, and that might make you also motivated to keep posting. So one of the things I find in terms of digital strategies is that before, we really had to make sure that all of our content was fresh, that we posted something different on Instagram, then we posted on TikTok, then we posted on, all of the other networks. What I've been advising a lot of people to do is just get a scheduler if you can at all, as in Hootsuite or any other program, sign up for the free version and just put the content that you are about to post on all of the networks. Don't worry about writing something different for each of them. Don't worry about making, different graphics for each of them. The alignment might be a little bit off, for instance, if you're posting a graphic, and it might be a little bit cut off on certain devices, but I would still rather you posted it on all of them with one click than worried about creating 8 different versions and then not do it at all. So what usually I will say is we need minimum three assets for every event, right? You need to create one before, which might be the flyer, might be the teaser, might be whatever you want to call it, but something that lets people know when the event is happening, who's going to be there, as in who your speaker is, and where they should show up. So for example, which room of your library the event is taking place. And then that's it, just make it very simple and post that. The second one, though, is very important. Something during the event needs to be posted. Something that will make people feel, for lack of a better word, like they're really, really missing out, right? So if it's live streaming, great. If you have the capacity to live stream an event, great. But if you don't, even if you just snap a picture during the event and you can post that, that will already raise your event above the standard, the bare minimum. And I know I'm using the term bare minimum not to downgrade events that don't have somebody taking a picture of the speaker, but I do feel that that's a very simple, very easy step that we can all do. If I'm in the room, I will be taking lots of pictures of the speaker, of my author, and then posting them. And then, of course, I'm tagging everybody involved. So I'm tagging the library, I'm tagging all the organizations who supported, of course, the speaker, who's my client, as well as their publisher, if it's a book event, also their conversation partner. And if that person has a book, then their publisher too, because I know that the more people I can tag, the more people will share it. Now, one of the things that, of course, is a relatively new feature, but is very, very helpful for our purposes, is Instagram's co-posting feature. So you could always invite people to co-post with. So let's say that your library account doesn't have a lot of followers, maybe it has 200, but you've invited a speaker who has 2,000 or even more, then just co-post with them. And that's a very easy feature. You can find it under your settings, invite them to co-post, and once they accept it, it will show up on their feed. We have done that with every event in the last few months, ever since this feature got rolled out, and it really amplified the pre-event outreach, and we have been seeing the increase in terms of attendees, especially when we do an event where the flyer shows something that attendees are drawn to. So for example, there will be a giveaway, or there will be food, or which I know is not always an option, but if you have something extra, putting that on the flyer will almost guarantee higher turnout. So we love doing that. When it comes to photography, I'm a big fan of taking photos before the event starts, because usually authors are the calmest and attendees are the calmest. Everybody is the calmest before the event starts. So I would ask all of you to, when you invite someone, to take your picture with them. And they love taking their pictures with librarians. They love doing it with booksellers, with everyone. And it's for their website, it's for their social media, it's for their promotion of future events. So please help the authors out and take your picture with them, and then take their picture in front of any poster that you might have done. That helps them a lot. And then the third one I will talk about is, if you are able to somehow live stream the event, that makes such a huge difference, because a lot of us are reluctant. A lot of people, I will not put myself in that category. I'm very happy to attend events, but a lot of people are reluctant still to attend events. And then also for health reasons, they might not be able to attend. But when you have an event that is live streamed, that will allow other people to also access it. not to mention location. If somebody is out of state or if somebody is in a different location, but you are able to get their attention through social media or through your newsletter or through some other partnership or other way, then being able to live stream the event for them is really, really incredible. And then, of course, whenever you live stream, you get a copy of that recording. So that recording will hopefully live forever on your YouTube channel or on your library's website, or wherever it might be, where it will attract further views and it will attract further interest in your event series or whatever this was a part of. So a few of those digital tools, we could spend a lot of time on this, and if any of you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and then I will be happy to answer particular questions about any of this, but otherwise I will move on, and we can always come back to the digital tools. So I would also like to talk about an event that we have recently done with Brittany Friedman. So this is just a short, a small image that we created of all of her tour stops so far. And of these tour stops, I would like to highlight her Wood Cafe Co event in Long Beach. So this is a queer-owned bookstore that in Long Beach is very, very popular. It's becoming very popular. It's just recently opened. And this event will be in partnership with multiple organizations that Brittany is a part of. So Brittany is a professor of sociology at USC. So of course, we will invite everybody, all of her students, to this event. We have also spread the word about this event through the USC Library. And the reason we were able to do that is because she's also going to do an event a few days later at USC Sociology, but that one is sort of a closed event. So this is the open version of that. If anybody would like to come to it and they find out about it through USC's library or through the Black Students Union, which is another organization that will support this event, then they can come there. And then Brittany will also be in conversation with some of her friends from various industries. So one of them is in filmmaking, so she'll bring one kind of audience. The other one is an artist, so they will bring another audience. So it's a really collaborative type of event where we have at least 6 different groups of people who are coming. And then this is also happening in Long Beach, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. It's a little bit farther from the campus, so it will attract people who normally wouldn't really travel to downtown LA, which is about 40 minutes from there. So hopefully this will be a very successful event. I will also highlight that she's doing a lot of different events with universities. We didn't put all of them on this flyer because it wouldn't have fit. But for instance, her Brown event will, of course, be supported by the library. It will be supported by multiple student organizations. And then she'll also have books for sale from a local bookstore. So usually every event we do will have multiple so-called sponsors. They're not financially sponsoring, but they are sponsoring by sending out the information and by providing the attendees to the event, by bringing the captive audience to the event. I see a question in the chat, so I'm going to take a moment to read this and answer. So library communications, yes, of course. And I'm not suggesting that you take a one-size-fits-all approach on every channel. I understand that it's all unique and you'll have to, look at your unique situation. And I'm happy to answer any question that you might have about your situation. I'm not able to address every situation. But if you have a particular one, then I'm happy to talk about that. And also, it sounds like you don't have access to social media from the library, and that might be an issue with some of the with some libraries. And in that case, you just have to rely on the attendees to have social media access. And if you're working with someone who is in academia, usually they do have their preferred platform. Sometimes it's LinkedIn, sometimes it's X, sometimes it's Threads, but almost every academic will be on at least one of them. And then the challenge is making sure that they do post and making sure that they do bring people to the event. Now, if social media is not an option, then you have to work with the internal options that you have. Because if you set up an event, but you don't promote it, then unfortunately, there will not be any attendance. and that can be very frustrating. So the word has to get out. And the reason I'm using social media as an example is because that's the best way that you're going to bring people who otherwise wouldn't know about it. So internally, I know you'll spread the word. That's almost guaranteed. I've never heard of anybody setting up an event and not spreading the word internally. Social media is the challenging one. And that's also with the clients that we work with. It's a challenge to get them to do it, but usually once they do it, and then at the event, they meet people who came because they saw the post, then they'll do it again for the next event. Okay, so if you have any other questions, then feel free to put them in the chat. And then I will just move on to the next subject that we have here. So building strategic partnerships. And I know that you're very good at this, and I haven't met a librarian who wasn't a great networker. So I know I'm speaking to a good group of people here to, you don't need the elementary stuff, but I will say that there's nothing better than receiving an email from someone asking, would Professor so-and-so be interested and or available to come to, let's say, Connecticut or come to Ohio? And on the off chance that so-and-so would be interested, we would love to host them in our series. So what I notice is a lot of times our clients are getting requests far in advance and sort of timid requests where the person who is asking might think the person who they are asking about wouldn't want to come to a library event. And I always tell them, oh yes, they would be excited. In fact, and this is almost the case, they have a colleague at whichever university, insert the local universities, who could invite them to give a talk. And then usually what we like to do is our client will give a university talk, and then they'll give a talk at the library, and then we'll partner up with a local bookstore, let's say a Latinx-owned bookstore or a Black-owned bookstore, and they'll also do an event there. And that's really incredible to be able to add to their sort of tour, or to, even if the book has been out for a while and they're no longer on book tour, just to be able to say to them, okay, well, you're traveling to X location and you'll have these 3 events. So please do reach out. Don't feel that you have to limit yourself to local authors. Don't feel that just because you might not be able to offer an honorarium to them, you shouldn't even invite them. I think that, you know, if nothing else, they will be very flattered and they will work very, very hard to try to make it work. We always do. So if you see anybody on our side and you want to reach out, we will work hard to make sure that they can come to you. Just let me know. And then, you know, collaborating with universities. So I know that many of you have relationships with universities that already have the faculty, and the faculty might already be doing book talks, but maybe they are not doing the kind of talks that you would like them to do. So there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I saw an event series where it was 3 components. They had a reading, they had a Q&A, they had a panel, they had, you know, whatever it is. I think that you as librarians have the vision, but sometimes might feel limited by certain established guidance or guidelines and might not want to create those new types of programming. And in those cases, you can also reach out to others for partnerships. So for example, we work with a lot of independent coffee shops here in Los Angeles, or we work with a lot of bars. They'll have, you know, sort of a lecture where people can drink during that, or there's the New York City series Lectures on Tap. Those are amazing, and many of the people behind them are librarians. So if you can't make it work with your institution, then see if you can make it work with someone else. I, for one, will always be happy to work with you. And again, LGBTQ plus BIPOC authors is what I can bring you. So let me know. Now, engaging presenters for the promotion. I've talked about this. I stressed this before. It's so important. Please don't take no for an answer here. Sometimes we hear no. They'll say, oh, I posted about it once. It's enough. It's not enough. And a lot of times it will be very disappointing for them if the attendance is low. So don't worry about explaining to them that, you know, we have to ask your department. We have to ask everyone who you could potentially tap to bring to this event. I don't think any event should be simply just a library event unless you have a limitation and unless you're not allowed to bring anybody else. But if at all possible, always partner with some affinity organizations, always partner with other faculty, see who could put the word out. I have recently gone to, and I see that there are some questions, I will get to those, but I have recently gone to a library event with one of my clients, and they did such a beautiful job. This is here in Los Angeles. They did such a beautiful job of bringing all the flyers, bringing all the signs out, everything. They just printed them right there, making us feel so welcome. And it was a full house. And we asked everybody, where did you come from? Many of them came from various neighborhood organizations, the local neighborhood organizations that come throughout the month, throughout the week. They come to the library, they see the flyer, and then the librarians keep asking them to come back for our events. And we always have a full house there. So let me see if I have any questions that I can. The tools resonated in terms of expanding the audience, community, connected communication, resources. Yes, definitely including the community. Any tips for helping speakers in academia present their material in a way that will connect with an audience beyond the university? Yes, Carly, this is what I spend most of my time with. This is one of the most challenging parts, right? How do you create a presentation that is not an academic presentation, one that will draw everybody in? So I find that especially with those who are less experienced in this, with those speakers who are a little bit less experienced in this regard, you have to give them very clear timelines. I will tell them, you'll be introduced and then you will have 10 minutes to do your whole presentation. And 10 minutes should include the reading part, because what we don't want to see is you buried in the book with your head down for a good 20 minutes where nobody can really connect with you. And then when I'm training authors, because I do a lot of media training with them, I do a lot of preparation work for their various events, I will say, eye contact, let's make sure you're looking at me, let's make sure you keep connecting with me. Now, of course, that's not something that you might tell them, but you might tell them that, we'll have 10 minutes and after that, we'll open it to audience questions. Is that fine? And usually they'll say, yeah, that's fine. And then prepare a few questions that you can ask them just in case the audience is more shy, and just ask them those questions, or always ask them if they could bring a conversation partner. That really tends to help. And then if they don't know each other very well with the conversation partner, you might suggest that they connect before the event. I always do that with my authors, even if they know each other, even if they invited one of their colleagues that they've known for a long time, I will say, why don't you two connect for 10 minutes, 15 minutes before, just to make sure you're on the same page, and just to see if the conversation partner has the right questions. Because sometimes the questions will be very academic, and then if I'm on the call, I will say, well, this would work if the audience was all historians. But this is a community event, right? So let's ask a few questions that will be a little bit more accessible to the general public. So that's the chance to tailor it. We really wouldn't want to do it live. And then let everybody else who comes, the other historians, ask the more historian specific questions. So I think the best way to make sure that they present it in that way is to put very strict guidelines on the time. And then if you have access to, let's say, AV, ask them before, do you have any images? Do you have anything that you could show? Or is it going to be all text? Is it going to be you reading? And then you can tell them, gently, usually the events where you have, let's say, images tend to work better. Or do you think you could keep the reading limited and then the Q&A larger, things like that. I don't think you are going to offend anybody by saying, we want to keep this accessible. They know, academics know that sometimes being accessible is a challenge for them. So I hope that answers your question. And then if there are any others, please feel free to bring them. Now, when it comes to partnerships with nonprofits and local organizations, this is one of the hardest parts. We have worked so hard over the last 5 years to build these relationships. And sometimes we build them, and then the person who we have been in touch with and done multiple events with will transition to another organization, and then maybe they are not in that role anymore and we can't have them support our event anymore. That's always a challenge. I don't have a magic bullet or silver bullet for you here, but what I will say is we spend about half an hour every day just reaching out to local organizations, because again, we're national and we have lots of clients. You wouldn't have to do that. You would just do it, maybe for a limited amount of time within a limited scope first. But what I found is just emailing them and telling them, we have an event, for instance, for Women's History Month. And since you are one of the organizations that we would really love to partner with on any of these events, do either of these speakers look good? Would you want to co-sponsor an event? And co-sponsoring, again, could just mean they will bring the audience. They will spread the word to their audience, or it could mean that they provide some resources. In the case of libraries, I know that resources would be helpful. So again, try to negotiate with the organizations. I don't know if financial resources are going to be in the cards, but a lot of times they will have other resources, like they can do all of your design, they can do your printing of the flyers. I mean, I know those are smaller things, but they can do things like, donate the food. We almost always have a sponsor for the food, and it's usually a local organization, not a business. We don't really reach out to businesses, even though probably that would be more fruitful, but that's really not our setup, not our company. We usually collaborate with nonprofits, and almost every event will have them sponsor some of the food for attendees, for instance. They will sponsor things like the Los Angeles Public Library has beautiful, many beautiful rooms, and sometimes one of our authors will want to have their book lounge there. It's not free, it's not a library event, technically it's a private event, but there will be an organization who will sponsor it because they love working with the LA Public Library, things like that. So those organizations are the ones that we reach out to. You're welcome, Carly. If you would like to revisit this subject, feel free to put in any other questions, and I'm going to move on to the next one in the meantime. So I have this short little case study that I would like to share. It's the book tour schedule for Marlene Dowd, who's also our client. She's at Yale, she's a historian, and her book is doing beautifully. And she has done a lot of events. She continues to do these events. You'll see a few of them on this flyer. So for instance, the Free Library of Philadelphia is an amazing partner, and they welcomed her and did an incredible event for her. Or many of the colleges and other institutions that you'll see on these flyers have used the library as their platform to host the event. So for instance, one of her colleagues would invite her to speak, and then the library would be the location. The librarians, as well as the history department, as well as the African American Studies department would partner with her. We would invite students from all the organizations that are relevant. And then we would always hope for and thankfully get really great attendance. Now, you'll see that someone like her, you can find some of her speeches online. She's an incredibly experienced speaker. There's no issue with her keeping the audience's attention. She's very good at reading. The major challenge for someone like her is making sure that the events are not repetitive, because her time is very limited. She teaches full time. She's also a mother. She travels a lot. So we wanted to make sure that no two events were the same. And I think that, as librarians, many of you are able to be creative and come up with event ideas that can focus on a different part of the book, because usually you are familiar with the book. I don't think I've ever had the experience of going to an event with a library where at least they didn't skim the book and usually have fully read the book. So you will have ideas on what to focus on, not just a regular book talk, but maybe let's do a book talk that specifically explores US-Haiti relations. We had that event. Or let's do an event that focuses on not just the complicated legacy of Henri Christophe, but also on what we take away from that, what today's leaders, what our leaders could take away from this, what are the history lessons here. Or let's do one that is let's do one that is focused on writing a history tome this book is 600 plus pages, and let's do it with young historians who might be working on their first book. This is not her first book. So what you can contribute a lot of times to an author's book tour or an author's, continued book appearances is an event that is different from what they have already done, not just a simple book talk, but a more thoughtful discussion. And those are the ones that they tend to love the most. So she's still open to invitations, as are most of our clients. So if any of this is sparking any interest in you, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be very happy to put you in touch with her and also help you facilitate the event. Then I'm going to transition to how you can expand your reach and build momentum. So of course, one-off events are incredible, but so are event series. So I'm going to use the Los Angeles Public Library as an example, where multiple event series have been happening over the years. Now, we're very lucky that the LA Public Library is relatively well-supported, well-funded, and so many of the programs are made possible by other organizations. But I think that if any of you are looking for inspiration, they were going to be one of the case studies I was going to use, but I thought that that might venture too far and we might not have time for questions, but they have been able to make a lot of event series happen by community support. So for example, one is their Indie Author Day, which has been going on for a few years, I would say 5 or 6 years, where they invite independent authors. Many of our clients have been invited, and they feature them and they bring the community. No one will bring as many people as indie authors because they're given so few opportunities. So for instance, one of our clients, Brian Finney, who retired from teaching and then decided that he wanted to become a novelist. Before, he was an English professor and he wrote lots of nonfiction books, award-winning books, but then he decided to follow his passion and write novels. And these novels were self-published because it was harder for him to find a publisher for these. And he's been featured in various indie author days, including through the library. And those events were very, very full because he made sure that the few opportunities that he had, he would bring his whole family, all of his friends, all of his colleagues, everyone. So again, don't discount indie authors. Sometimes they will really, really surprise you. One, the content of the book is great. The style can be beautiful. And as you all know, publishing has sort of a limited vision of what's possible to publish and whose work is the most sellable. So don't discount the indie books. And if at all possible, include some indie authors in the series and see how they will pack the house. In my experience, they really do go above and beyond. Now, what I've noticed is with the public library, with the LA Public Library, sometimes they will test an event or two, and if it's successful, they will turn it into a series. So all of their reading series started that way. Their old poetry series, I believe, started that way. The Aloud series started that way, where one event was very, very successful. People loved it. The feedback was great. And then they made it into a series. So collecting the feedback is very, very important because that's how you know if people would come back. And usually I will get an email after the event asking how my experience was. And I'm assuming, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming if they collect positive feedback from everybody, then the events will keep going and will turn into a series, versus if they don't, then it might not be the case. So later I can give you some tools for easily collecting feedback. Creating a welcoming experience. So I know that this is something you all try to do. And of course, very few people would feel unwelcome in a library, right? So I will just highlight 3 things that I think create a very welcoming experience for people. One of them is, especially if you are in a large library, clear signage so that you know where to head for the event. So I'll return to the LA Public Library as an example. If you're familiar with it, it's a huge library, incredibly, incredibly hard to find any particular space, but they make it easy because they have signs every corner and they will have an arrow that shows you which way to turn. So I've never been lost for an event because the signage always helped me. By the same token, I've been to some research libraries where our clients had events, And I had a hard time finding them when they didn't have the signage, and I would have to ask everyone. And, you know, of course, students and faculty will be able to point you in the right direction, but it's just so much easier if you have clear signage. So that's my number one. Number two, for making you feel welcome, again, having somebody who says hi to you. Some libraries do an incredible job, and I know they have more staff, so it's easier for them to have somebody say hi. But what I find is, for instance, if the room is open much earlier, I'm someone who will show up half an hour early. There's no one there. I will look for who to talk to. I will look for a way to figure out what's going on, what's happening with the event. It's just much easier when, let's say, the door isn't open until 5 minutes before or 10 minutes before. And then when it's opened, somebody will greet me and say, you came to the event, great, right there across that door, sit down there, perfect. So either signage or somebody to guide you through, put you in the right seat is really, really great. And I will say the third thing that makes the experience very welcoming is when, and this is from the author's side, is when somebody asks the author up front, you know, how do you pronounce your name? Is this the right bio to read? You know, hopefully the author sent over their bio and did their part, but is this the right bio to read for you? Is this how you would like to be introduced? We have a copy of your book, or if we don't have a copy of your book, did you bring one? We could put it on a stand behind you, you know, sit here, here's a bottle of water. That's always super nice. And, you know, welcome. If you are able to tell them how many people you might expect, you know, these events usually draw anywhere between 15 to 20 people, you know, just those little details, because authors always show up feeling very, very nervous, and just being made to feel welcome goes a long way. And then I really love when they are asked for a picture. If they aren't asked, I will say, you know, let's take a picture together with the two of you, and I'll take the picture, and we'll of course share it after the event, and then we'll share it during the event on social media. So those are the little moments that make it memorable for them. And hopefully you have been in communication with the guests throughout. You've asked them to share the event. You've asked them to bring their people. So if their people are already seated, they are hopefully feeling a little bit less nervous. But again, the nerves can be eased by, you know, having the clear signage, having somebody greet them, having them, you know, kind of walk through how the programming is going to go, and, you know, just making sure that they know what's next. So, and then making the event memorable. So some of the events, I was thinking of this before the presentation. What are the most memorable events? Of course, the ones that are so well attended that they're standing room only are always memorable. But the other ones that are extremely memorable are the ones where we're able to include as many people as possible by providing the things that can be a challenge to provide, of course. So sometimes live streaming. I know not all of you will have access to live streaming, but if you have, let's say, a student who volunteers and is willing to put a tripod in the corner, put a phone on there, and just log into whichever account, if you are able to allow it, and they're able to log into even their own account and live stream it from there, that could make a big difference, because then you can get the recording from them. We have done this many times. I live stream most events. I ask for permission beforehand. Is this okay? Is it okay if I record it? And, you know, very rarely they will say, no, unfortunately, this panel cannot be recorded, or this event cannot be recorded. Of course, I'll respect that. But whenever it's possible, I will record it. And they are usually very happy to have that recording. And I'm not doing anything special. I'm just using a cheap little tripod I got on Amazon for $13. I put it in the corner. I put my phone on there, and I just stream from there. And sometimes I use our platform, but usually I use the platform of whichever organization we partnered with. And they are happy to then turn it into a recording, or turn it into a Facebook post, or turn it into an Instagram post, or whatever it is, put it in the archives. And the authors love it. They are very proud of it. They'll put it on their website, and we'll continue to promote the event. So let's see. That's one part of making the event memorable. The other part, of course, is by questions that the author wouldn't have anticipated, and librarians are really amazing at this. amazing at asking the kinds of questions that maybe their peers haven't asked, maybe the general public hasn't asked, but I'm talking about questions. This happened maybe 4 days ago, a question about the process of researching a book where there are no written records from the person who the book addresses. So the book is centered around the character, but there are no written records. There are lots of records about their trial, about the case, but there are none from him. How did you come up with his words? That's not something that she's been asked before, even though she's a historian and she has talked to lots of historians. Historians didn't really think in those terms. So asking questions that they haven't been asked is also going to make the event memorable. And the last one, and again, I know this comes down to budget, but when there's a flyer or something like what I have there printed out, I usually get these very, very affordably. This is all of our clients, but this could also be just one poster, one flyer, and I would prop it up, and this would be at an event space. That makes a big difference. Authors and participants love taking their pictures next to it. They love when they get to keep it. Some of the libraries will let us keep it, and that's the kinds of keepsake that no author has ever refused. In fact, sometimes I have to hold on to them because they took public transport, and I'll say, don't worry, I'll save it for you. I'll mail it to you. I roll it up. So these things, again, I know they cost money. If you are able to afford it, this is always an incredible gift for somebody who you invited. I am going to see, there's a question about promoting libraries events on social media when the ethics of some of the major platforms are concerning and don't align with the ethics and/or mission statements of libraries, especially when it comes to DEI, and how that might appear to potential attendees. I know this is such a great struggle, and a lot of our authors will ask me, like, is it still okay for me to post on these platforms? I feel sick to my stomach by what or from what these owners are doing. And I will say, you know, you have to use, this is what I tell authors, you have to use your ethical judgment. I will not judge you for posting or not posting, but I know that a lot of your peers have left these platforms. I know some of them are still there. It's an individual decision. Ultimately, I know a lot of people have moved from these platforms. So everybody who moved from X to Threads or Blue Sky would probably appreciate if you posted there. At the very least, co-posted. And if you dropped X for ethical reasons, I don't think anybody would fault you for it. And the same goes for Meta. Honestly, if you dropped it, everybody would know why you dropped it, because you felt that their policies are not those that you can align yourself with. So in general, I will tell authors, you know, do what you're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable on these platforms, definitely feel free to leave them. And I would say the same to you. Feel free to leave those. People will still find the event. And maybe what you can do is, when you have the flyers printed, put the handles for whichever platforms you do decide to be on, put those on there and say, if you would like to be invited to the next event, follow us here. Or in the newsletter, if you have one, you could share, you know, this is where we're posting now. And, you know, you could say the reason or not say the reason, but definitely say, follow us here if you would like to be notified. Now, the best thing I find is your newsletter, because these platforms, one, might not align with your beliefs, might not work ethically. But two, these platforms are also very quick to ban people. I've had clients who were banned for using terms that were absolutely normal terms, and not recently, but they have been removed. I've also had clients whose webinars we have hosted or helped them, and because they use certain hashtags in these webinars, the content was deleted. However, through the newsletter, they were still able to share the same content. So no matter where you're posting, please keep trying to grow your newsletter as well. So at every event, I ask, you know, if at all possible, let's pass something around and ask people to sign up. And usually it's just paper and pen, very, very old school. Sign up so that you can be notified of the next event. and sometimes both for the venue or for the author, because that's the only thing we have control over, the email list. We don't have control over any of these social media accounts, any of the social networks. So whatever unethical thing they will do next can definitely taint our view of them. So yes, please keep building your newsletter. I will transition to the next slide, and I will do a quick case study, a quick shout out to Robin Bernstein, who's a history professor at Harvard. She has done lots of incredible events, and she's one of those speakers who is very, very engaging, even though her book is Freeman's Challenge. So it's a history book about a murder that is lesser known or practically unknown. Her book put it on the radar. We were able to create a really, really good book tour for her. I would say she had at least 20 stops, and that's including all of her academic stops. And she's been in conversation with lots of amazing scholars, friends. So for instance, her conversation with Nicole Fleetwood was extremely popular and well attended. And this was at the New York Society Library, who we have worked with before, and who was very happy to host her because they knew that from the previous recordings that she would do a really, really good talk. One thing I would like to highlight here is that this event was both in person and virtual. So we put 2 QR codes for people to register. And then this was this kind of flyer in various versions was shared both on her social media, on Dr. Fleetwood's social media, on their various publishers' social media accounts. It was shared in her newsletter. We also had the flyer printed, and then that printed flyer was at her university's various boards. She would take them when she would walk somewhere. She would put the flyers in various cafes, like bulletin boards. So she's very good at that. She's a really incredible partner in promoting her own events. And that was how this became such a popular, fully sold out event. She has just done another one yesterday at the Boston Athenaeum, also in a very, very cold weather, 80 plus people, all the books sold. So again, when you have somebody who is extremely active and you can ask them to do these things, I know it makes your job easier. And usually you can spot those scholars, you can spot those guests by looking at their social media. And if they are active and if they're posting the other events, that's a good indication that they'll do the same for yours. And if you are looking for a sold out kind of full house, then definitely invite those scholars first, and then maybe put them in conversation with someone else who's maybe more up and coming, might not have that much reach, and then that will help them. And that's definitely not Dr. Fleetwood. That's not how I would like to phrase it. But sometimes we put our clients in conversations with their graduate student, or maybe the grad student is the moderator, and they will go out of their way to do the best job. They'll ask incredible questions. They're usually very, very motivated and very excited to be in the room, and they will also bring their own community. So that's another way to expand it. We never really like to limit who our clients are in conversation with. We, however, try to make as many panels as possible happen. So the solo book talk, the one author kind of talk is not really as fruitful as when you have a panel, for instance, or where you have at least one conversation partner. And that brings me to my next piece with Robin Bernstein, where we hosted an event for her and her colleagues at the ASA. I'm trying to advance the slide. Hang on one second. Here we go. So at the ASA conference, the American Studies Association conference, many of the members had books coming out, and some of them had fresh books that came out a few months earlier. So what we did is we partnered with Red Emma's, which is one of the bookstores that we often work with, and we put together this party where every scholar would be selling their book, and They were really, really good partners in this because they provided the food, they provided the music. It was a true party right after the conference. And this is also my way of showing you that a flyer like this is very, very helpful. When you give this to a group of academics, they will each print 100 copies and they will each put the 100 copies up in their department and up everywhere that they can possibly do. And this event was extremely, extremely full and very early sold out. They originally, I believe, had 200 spots, and those went very, very quickly. And I think they rotated some guests out throughout the evening. They sold the books, so this was very successful. And then, of course, this was in partnership with the American Studies Association, and one of the attendees here is the president of the association. So I will advance, and again, feel free to jump in with any questions. I will highlight some tools that I think could be helpful for you. So the flyer you just saw was created with Canva, nothing special, nothing fancy. Sometimes I create these myself. I'll just use a template. We do have a designer, but he's very busy, so sometimes I'll just do that. And then I get all of our authors to do the same, to get access to Canva or some other free tool where they can create these very simple graphics and then just print and share or share digitally. Sometimes if it's an event that is very, very important to them, I will ask them to put it in their signature. You can do the same. You can ask the attendees to do that, or you can create these yourselves. Sometimes you might have somebody who's a volunteer who's a bit more graphically inclined. I'm not so myself, but if you have someone like that and they are able to create these, people love these visuals. So tools that you can use to stream the events: StreamYard, Zoom, YouTube. I'm sure you're familiar with these, but just want to make sure if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We've talked about what social platforms tend to bring in the most attendees. I would say for certain events, it's interesting because LinkedIn posts tend to bring in people. And I didn't believe that up until the Elon Musk takeover of X. We didn't really post on LinkedIn about the events. We posted other things in LinkedIn articles, but never that. And since then, we have been posting there and we have been asking authors to do it. And people will mention, oh, you know, I saw your event on LinkedIn. I plan to come. And we also use MailChimp. We ask every author to, if nothing else, sign up for the free trial. On MailChimp, you can have up to 500 people. You can do the free trial and then spread the word about your event. So we ask them to do that so that we will have good attendance. We use SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, or if the institutions we're working with already have their own, then that, to get some feedback after the events. And I would encourage you, if you're not currently getting event feedback, to do that, or just hand out some note cards and ask people to give feedback, because that's how you know what events were popular and why, and then you can do more of those. Usually we are surprised by the feedback. Some people will say, I love the reading, but it was too long. Others will say, I have read the book, you should have read this part. Others will give very practical advice, you know, look up more when you're reading. So things like that. But also they'll say, you know, it was hard to find parking. Okay, maybe we need to send out the parking information next time. So just get the feedback and see if you can improve the event based on this feedback. I've mentioned Hootsuite. That's the platform that we use to push out the posts so that we don't have to individually post on every single platform. And usually we ask authors to just get the free account, but sometimes they'll get the paid account. It has more features, but the free account is perfectly fine. We use, for certain events, we'll use PR Newswire or EIN Presswire to put the word out so that the media could potentially be interested in the event if they would like to invite an author to an interview, or if they would like to come to the event, then that is how we are able to make it work. And then last but not least, I have created an event checklist that you're welcome to download if this is helpful to you. So please feel free to grab it at bit.ly/library event checklist. And this will walk you through some of the steps that could help make this a great event or make your next event a great one. And then if you would like to invite any of our clients, then you can do so at, there's a typo here. This is horrible. I apologize. CoriolisCompany.com is what it should say, /author events. You can tell this is the last slide I made in the last minute. So I apologize for that. And we'll put the real link in the chat. And with that, if you have any last minute questions, feel free to ask them. And I'll be very happy to answer those.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Nanda. I think I'll just start wrapping up and say, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, and thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Ty with a link to the recording. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. And we'll include those links from Nanda on the follow-up email as well. Okay, so thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you found the session informative and hope to see you again soon on another webinar. Thanks, everyone.